The first thing I registered was light, pale, diffuse, coming from a panel somewhere above me that hummed at a frequency I'd have flagged as a calibration fault in any fixture I'd ever signed off on. The second thing was the smell. Antiseptic, mineral, and underneath, both of those something faintly warm, like heated stone, that didn't belong to any medical facility I'd been in before. The third thing was a small face, watching me from a distance of about 4 feet. She was standing at the end of the cot, both hands wrapped around the lower rail, chin just clearing the top bar. Pale green skin, the color of early frost on copper, and eyes the size of something that had no business being in a face that's small, silver gray, wide, steady. Pointed ears just visible through dark hair that had been pulled back with more intent than success. She was watching me the way you watch a structural reed that might shift if you breathe wrong. I didn't say anything, neither did she. The light hummed. Somewhere outside the shelter walls I could hear the low, recursive knock of construction machinery operating in a cadence I recognized as the Eastern Quadrant's mid-afternoon shift, which meant it was still the same day, which meant whatever had happened, the outpost was still working. I did a quiet inventory while she watched me. Head, a pressure behind my left eye that wasn't painful yet but had opinions about sudden movement. Left side, 2 locations along the rib cage that were already forming strong arguments against deep breathing. Left shoulder, a dull, spreading ache of the kind that comes from impact against something unforgiving. Left hip, a long, low throb. Right side, functional, no complaints. So I had gone down on my left. The image came back in pieces. The Eastern Survey run. The corridor at segment 4, which I'd been walking since 6 in the morning, checking the phase seal integrity at the junction points. The sound that wasn't a crack, not the sound you expect from structural failure, not dramatic, just a low, wet tectonic settling, the kind that means something load-bearing has moved out of its tolerances. And then the floor. "You're awake." The voice came from my left. I turned my head slower than I intended, which told me additional things about the concussion's current position on the cooperative end of the scale, and found a woman in a gray field clinic tunic standing at a low cabinet, her back to me, doing something methodical with a tray of instruments, taller than the child by a significant margin. Same pale green skin, same pointed ears, dark hair pinned back in a knot that had held up considerably better than the child's attempt. She moved with no wasted motion. Everything placed exactly where it was supposed to be, everything in the order it was supposed to be in. She turned when I didn't respond. Her face was calm. Not the professional calm that people perform over worry, the actual kind. The kind that comes from having made a decision about what is useful in a given situation and then fully committing to it. She had a small medical scanner in her right hand, and she raised it without ceremony, crossed to the side of the cot, and passed it along my left side in a single practiced arc. The scanner made a soft sound I couldn't read. "How do you feel?" she said. "Where am I?" I said, not a question, a recalibration. "Kethvarath Outpost Field Medical Shelter," she said. "Eastern Supply Annex, 3rd Bay. You've been here for approximately 4 hours." 4 hours. I held that and worked backward. The survey run had started at 6. The junction at segment 4 was between 8 and 900 meters in from the exterior access. The shift was 3 hours into its afternoon cycle. That put the collapse somewhere around midday, which was when I'd been moving from junction 3 toward junction 4, which was when the sound. "The corridor," I said. "The eastern phase seal failed at the junction between segments 4 and 5, she said. She was watching the scanner now, moving her eyes over the readout with the same careful quality she'd given the instrument tray. "You were found approximately 30 meters inside segment 4. 2 of the outpost's construction workers carried you out." "How long was I in there before they found me?" "I don't know the exact interval. Approximately 40 minutes from the collapse event to your arrival here, based on the timestamps." 40 minutes was a long time for a man to be unconscious in a compromised corridor. I didn't say that. She already knew it, the scanner had told her. Who else was in there? I said. She lowered the scanner and looked at me directly for the first time. Her eyes were the same color as the child's, silver gray, clear, with a quality of attention that was professional and also, underneath the profession, something quieter and more personal. We can discuss the outpost situation after I've completed the assessment, she said. Who else was in there? A pause, short but deliberate, the pause of someone who is deciding whether the practical answer is also the right one. 3 compact survey workers, she said. Survey teams Bravo and Delta partial. They were in segments 6 through 8 when the phase seal failed. The junction collapse in segment 5 has blocked the primary exit corridor. I was already sitting up. Please don't do that, she said, and her voice had exactly the same quality as before. Not alarm, not command, just a flat factual preference, clearly stated, offered without force. I need to know what equipment is in this shelter, I said. You have 2 cracked ribs on the left side, a concussion consistent with a secondary impact event, and soft tissue bruising across your left shoulder and hip. You are not, at this moment, someone who should be making structural assessments or asking about equipment. I'm the survey coordinator for the eastern phase, I said. I designed the load sequence for that corridor. I know something that whoever is running the rescue operation right now does not know, and if they proceed without knowing it, people are going to get hurt. She was quiet. The scanner was still in her hand. She looked at me with the arithmetic expression, the look of someone working a calculation that doesn't have a clean output. What is it you know? She said. I need to know what approach the rescue coordinator is taking first, I said. If I'm wrong about what they're doing, it doesn't matter. But if I'm right, Field Coordinator Drav Amath is attempting to access the eastern corridor through the secondary maintenance crawlway in segment 3, she said. His stated plan is to establish a survey line from inside and begin clearing debris from the segment 5 junction, working inward from the segment 4 side. I had worked with Drav Amath for 3 weeks. He was a solid man, thorough, methodical, the kind of coordinator who reads every directive twice before acting and files his reports the same evening. He was also working from the standard compact load sequence table that every field coordinator carried on every frontier resettlement outpost in this sector, because it was the table that had been sufficient for 40 years of construction work on 40-odd frontier moons, and the engineers who had written the original framework had never surveyed a formation like the one under Keth Varath's eastern quadrant. He can't clear from the inside, I said. The segment 3 crawlway exits into segment 4. The junction failure in segment 5 is a lateral shear event. It's not a vertical collapse. The debris stack is holding itself in place through counter-pressure on the right face. If he starts clearing from inside the junction, working from the segment 4 side, he relieves that counter-pressure and the whole junction comes down. The sealing of segment 4 will follow. He'll be inside segment 4 when that happens, and so will anyone who's found an exit point from 6 through 8. The words came out flat and even because there was no other useful way to say them. I watched her take them in. You're certain, she said. I flagged the sheer risk in my survey notes 2 days ago, I said. The load sequence table doesn't account for a specific foundation variance I found in the eastern anchor points on Tuesday. There's a clay shale interface under the eastern quadrant at 3 meters that behaves like a bearing surface in dry conditions and a lubricant when it's wet. The spring melt from the upper plateau has been moving through the substrate for 6 weeks. I found a 17 millimeter deviation in the anchor point positions. The standard tolerance is 8. I was going to file the formal correction document today. The data is in my survey bag, which is in segment 4. If the data is in segment 4, the numbers are in my head, I said. I keep the unfiled corrections in my head because the bag can go missing. The numbers don't. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she crossed to the far wall of the shelter, where a comm panel was mounted above a narrow table, and lifted the handset. "Field Coordinator Amath," she said. "This is Medical Officer Railveth at the field shelter. I need you to hold your current approach until I can send someone to you. Yes. Hold your position inside Segment 3 and do not proceed into Segment 4. Medical Authority, Compact Field Operations Provision, Section 9, Clause 2. A pause, during which I could hear a faint voice from the handset that I couldn't make out. "I understand your timeline, Coordinator. Please hold." She replaced the handset. She turned back to me. "You have approximately 20 minutes before he stops listening to a medical officer with no structural authority." "I need something to write on," I said. Save was already moving. She had not moved from the end of the cot since I woke up, had not fidgeted, had not shifted her weight, had not made any of the small adjustments that children make when they've been standing still too long. She simply went directly to the cabinet on the far side of the shelter, the one her mother had been working at, and opened the second drawer with the ease of someone who knew exactly which drawer held what and had known it for some time. She came back with a survey pad and a stylus, and held them out to me with both hands. I took them. "Thank you," I said. She went back to the end of the cot, put her hands on the rail, kept watching. I started writing. The load sequence for the Eastern Corridor was a 13-step document that assumed a standard foundation variance of plus or minus 8 millimeters, because that was the tolerance that had held for 40 years of compact frontier construction work. It also assumed a dry substrate, because nobody had done a spring melt substrate analysis on this particular formation before the outpost broke ground, because the formation was classified as a Type 3 frontier substrate, which was the type the compact had been building on for 40 years, and Type 3 substrates didn't require spring melt analysis under the current framework. The current framework was wrong about that. A clay shale interface at 3 meters behaved like a bearing surface in dry conditions. It distributed load evenly, compressed predictably, gave you the numbers you expected. In wet conditions it became something else. It didn't fail dramatically. There was no crack, no sudden event. It shifted. Gradually, over weeks, as the melt moved through it, it let the anchor points migrate. A millimeter here, 2 millimeters there, until the cumulative variance hit 17, and the load geometry the corridor was built around no longer matched the load geometry that actually existed. The phase seal junction in Segment 5 had been the first point to feel it, because Segment 5 sat closest to the apex of the melt path, the place where the spring water from the upper plateau was moving fastest through the substrate, eroding the clay shale interface at its most active point. And when the junction moved, it moved laterally, leftward, because the melt path ran left to right through the formation, and the path of least resistance is always the direction the water has already chosen. That lateral movement was why the debris stack was load-bearing on its right face. The left face had already shifted past its tolerance point. The material on the left was loose, settling, waiting for something to disturb it. The right face was what was holding the junction together. If you cleared from the inside, working from Segment 4 toward Segment 5, you disturbed the right face first. And when the right face went, the stack went, and the ceiling of Segment 4 went with it. If you cleared from the outside, working from Segment 6 toward Segment 5, you approached from the direction the material had moved away from. You cleared the left face first, in stages, relieving pressure in a sequence that matched the lateral geometry. The ceiling of Segment 4 stayed up. The workers in 6 through 8 found their exit. Everyone came out. I wrote the sequence out in full. I wrote the specific order of operations, with the specific measurements and the specific tool requirements for each step. In the margin, I drew the load geometry, the lateral shear, the force arrows, the counterpressure on the right face, the numbered boxes showing the clearance sequence. I have learned over 14 years that field coordinators are practical people, and that practical people respond better to diagrams than to paragraphs. 11 minutes, I handed the pad to Save. "Can I see?" she said. And then, when I held it toward her, she took it with both hands and studied the load diagram for a long moment. Her eyes moved over it in the same methodical way her mother's eyes moved over a scanner readout, systematically, left to right, following the logic. "The arrows are the force directions," she said. "Yes," I said. "And the numbers next to the boxes are the order you do the things." "Yes." "And the boxes with the dotted lines are the parts that will fall if you do it wrong." I looked at her. "Yes," I said, "exactly right." She handed the pad back. She looked at it once more before releasing it, and then she let go of the rail and straightened up to her full height, which was not considerable but was very deliberate. "I need to bring this to Ameth myself," I said. I was looking at Railveth when I said it. She gave me the arithmetic expression. "You have 2 cracked ribs," she said. "I know." "A moderate concussion." "I know that too." "The eastern site is 400 meters across active construction terrain with uneven ground and active machinery." "I've been surveying that terrain for 3 weeks," I said. "I know where the soft ground is. I know where the machinery runs." "The concussion presents a risk of secondary disorientation," she said, "if you fall on active construction terrain." "Then I fall," I said. 3 people are in segment 6 through 8. They've been there for 4 hours. Ameth is in segment 3 about to do something that will bring the ceiling down on all of them. I'm the one who knows the sequence. The sequence is written down, but a written sequence delivered by a medical technician is not the same as a written sequence delivered by the survey coordinator who designed the corridor and can stand next to Ameth and answer his questions. She was quiet for a moment. The decided expression was working through its stages. "Save," she said, without taking her eyes off me. "I'll go with him," Save said from the end of the cot. She was already moving to the cabinet again, the 3rd drawer this time, which held a small field kit that was clearly Save's own. Compact, organized, the contents visible through the mesh pouch as she lifted it. "Save," her mother said, "the same name, different weight." "He might lose his footing," Save said. "Someone should be with him who knows the terrain." "You are 8 years old." "I walk the site every morning before my lessons," Save said, with the flat precision of someone citing a fact. "I've mapped the soft ground. I know where the orange flags are. I know where the machinery runs." This was, based on everything I had observed about her in the past 20 minutes, almost certainly true. "She can come," I said. Railveth looked at me with the expression that had something new in it, not quite exasperation, not quite calculation, something that sat between them and was adjacent to both. "Stand up," she said. I stood up. It was a negotiation, but I completed it. She ran the scanner along my left side again, longer this time, then along my right, then the head. She stood in front of me with the readout and studied it, and I did not rush her, because she was doing the calculation that mattered, and she was the one qualified to run it. "The ribs are stable," she said finally. "No displacement. The concussion indicators are moderate within the range that allows ambulatory activity under supervision." She lowered the scanner. "If you experience visual distortion, sudden nausea, or a loss of spatial orientation, you stop. Not when it passes, when it begins. Immediately." "Understood." "You do not attempt to push through it." "I won't." "And you come back directly when it's done, not when you're satisfied it's done, when the workers are out." "That was always the plan," I said. She held the scanner for a moment longer. Then she put it back on the tray in its position, exactly where it went. She crossed to Save and put her hand on the child's shoulder. Not gripping, resting briefly, with a precision that had the same quality as everything else she did. Deliberate, complete, nothing wasted. The marked paths, she said. The orange flags, you stay back from the active zone. I know the orange flags, Save said. Railveth stepped back. We went. The Kethvareth outpost in late afternoon light was every frontier resettlement site I had worked in 14 years of compact survey contracts, and also specifically itself. Half-built, half-muddy, smelling of poured composite, and the mineral-cold air that came off the upper plateau in the late day. The skeleton of what it was going to be showed through the construction wrap on the half-finished residential blocks, and the finished sections, the medical shelter, the coordination office, the primary supply depot, sat among the skeletal frames like the first words of a sentence that had more to say. The eastern quadrant was marked off with incident barriers. Orange and yellow, the fast kind, the kind that go up inside an hour when something goes wrong and stay up until a person with a clipboard and structural authority says otherwise. I could see the mouth of the secondary maintenance crawlway in the base of the Segment 3 exterior wall from here. A gray rectangle, floor level, and 2 workers standing outside it in the posture of people who have received an instruction they don't entirely agree with, and are complying while being visibly unhappy about it. Save walked beside me. She did not offer her arm. She did not comment on my pace. She did not look at me with the evaluating expression that said she was tracking my condition and finding it concerning. She simply walked at the speed I was walking, slightly to my left, and when the terrain changed, she said what it was going to do. Left here, she said, where the ground was softer than it looked, and I moved left and it was more solid. The machinery comes in from the right in about 30 meters, she said, when we were passing the northern supply point, and I moved to the inside of the path to put the stack of material between us and the approach route. There's a good case to sit on near the Segment 6 panel, she said, about 200 meters in. It's been there for 3 days. Nobody's moved it. We'll see how the timing works, I said. We walked. The ribs had settled into a steady commentary that was manageable as long as I didn't deviate from the breathing pattern I'd established, slow, even, through the nose. The concussion was quiet, present but not disrupting. I counted the meters in the way you count things when counting is a useful discipline, and you need a discipline to hold on to. 212, 213, 214. Does it hurt? Save said when we were about halfway. Yes, I said. She nodded the filing nod. My mother says pain is information, she said. She says the mistake most people make is trying to stop listening to it instead of understanding what it's telling them. She's right, I said. She says a body that hurts is a body that's talking, Save said, and that ignoring it is like getting an important transmission and setting it aside because it's inconvenient to read right now. That's a very precise way to put it, I said. She explains things precisely, Save said, without pride or apology, so that I understand them correctly. She says unclear explanations make people make the wrong decisions later when they can't ask questions. I thought about that for a moment. She's right about that too, I said. Save was quiet for a while, then she said, "What's the clay shale interface?" I looked at her. You said it, she said, before you got up. You said there was a clay shale interface at 3 meters that behaved differently when it was wet. You were listening to that. I listened to everything, she said, in the same flat tone as when she'd cited her morning survey walks. My mother says you understand a situation by the details, not the summary. So I told her as we walked about the clay shale interface, about how clay particles packed into a bearing layer under dry conditions, the way the particles locked together under pressure and distributed load evenly across the surface, giving you stable numbers. About how water changed the particle relationship, how the clay swelled, how the shale below stayed rigid, How the difference in behavior between the two materials at the interface created a shear plane that moved under sustained load the way ice moves under weight when there's water between the ice and the rock beneath it. She listened with total attention. So the water made it slippery, she said. Yes, but not all at once, gradually over weeks. And the numbers shifted a little at a time, and you didn't know until you measured them. I measured them Tuesday, I said, and found the 17 mm variance, which is more than twice the standard tolerance. So you knew it was wrong, she said. I knew the numbers were wrong, I said. I was writing the correction to the load sequence table. The correction was in my survey bag. She was quiet for a moment. But the numbers were in your head, she said. Yes. Because you keep the unfiled ones there. Yes. She nodded, filed it, and we kept walking. Drav Ahmeth was a wide-shouldered man with a gray crew cut who had been building frontier resettlement outposts for 22 years, and he had the face of someone who had absorbed a great deal of information over those 22 years by a combination of reading, listening, and watching carefully, and who had learned to distinguish between the information that required immediate action and the information that required patience, and who was currently in a situation where those two categories were arguing with each other. He was standing at the mouth of the crawlway with his arms crossed and his comm unit in his right hand, and when he saw me coming across the construction terrain with Save beside me, he produced the expression I had come to recognize as his recalibration expression, the one that appeared when a new piece of information had arrived that was going to change the shape of what he was doing. Voss, he said. Ahmeth, I said, don't go in. The medical officer told me the same thing, he said. She didn't tell me why. I handed him the survey pad. He took it. He read it the way a practical man reads a technical document, not skimming, not jumping to the conclusion, but following the logic from the beginning, step by step, the way you follow a load sequence, because the sequence exists because the order matters and you can't understand the outcome without understanding the steps that produce it. He looked at the load diagram in the margin for a long time. Lateral shear, he said. Leftward, I said. The melt path runs left to right through the formation. The junction moved in the direction of least resistance. The right face is load-bearing. Yes, if you clear from the inside, you come at the right face first. You relieve the counterpressure and the stack fails. The sealing of segment 4 follows. He looked at the numbered sequence, at the approach route marked from segment 6, at the clearance order. External approach, he said. Through the segment 6 emergency access panel, I said. It's 40 meters further and it adds approximately 40 minutes. But you approach from the direction the debris stack has already moved away from, and you clear the left face first, in stages. The ceiling of segment 4 stays up. He looked up from the pad and looked at me. The foundation variance, he said, Tuesday. In my survey bag, I said, which is in segment 4. But I've been carrying the numbers in my head since Tuesday because I hadn't filed the correction yet, and the things I haven't filed are the things I hold onto most carefully. He looked at the diagram again. He was not a man who made decisions quickly, and he was not a man who made decisions slowly. He was a man who made decisions at the rate the decision required, and this one required a moment of full attention that he gave it without apology. This sequence, he said, from 6 clearing right to left in this order. Yes, specifically that order. The first 3 steps are the critical ones. They relieve pressure in the upper right quadrant of the stack before you touch anything below the midpoint. If you skip step 2, step 3 will destabilize the upper arch. He nodded. Bravo and Delta are intact, he said. Minor injuries. They've been holding position since the collapse. I've been talking to them on the comm. I let that information move through me. Minor injuries, holding position, intact. Good, I said. He put the comm to his ear. Teams in 6 through 8, this is Amath. We are changing approach. Abandon the junction attempt. Do not move any debris. Hold your current position. I will be on the exterior approach to the Segment 6 access panel in approximately 10 minutes, and you will hear me before you see me. He listened. Confirmed. Amath out. He lowered the comm and handed the survey pad back to me. Go back to the shelter, Voss, he said. When they're out, I said. He looked at me, did the calculation. There's an equipment case near the Segment 6 approach, he said. Stay there. I knew the equipment case. Save had told me about it. We went to it. Save sat on the ground beside it with her back against it and her field kit on her knees, and I sat on the case, and the afternoon light came in at the angle that made the half-built outpost look like a beginning rather than an interruption, and we waited. The sounds of the extraction work were specific and orderly. I listened to them and ran the sequence in my head alongside the physical sounds, matched each sound to its numbered step, checked the logic of the interval between steps, found nothing that didn't match. Amath was running the sequence correctly. His crew was working correctly. The ceiling of Segment 4 was staying where it was supposed to be. You can tell what they're doing from the sounds, Save said. Yes, I said. Because you know the sequence. Because I know what each step sounds like when it's done correctly, I said. The material movement, the tool sounds, the interval, they're all different at each step. Is it the same as how my mother knows from the scanner sounds whether something is right or not right? I thought about that. Something like that, I said. You spend enough time with a system, you start to understand its sounds as information. Save was quiet for a moment, then she said, I'm going to learn structures. The same flat, declarative tone she'd used for everything else. Not a wish, a statement of something already decided. Why structures? I said. Because they're underneath everything, she said. My mother works on the people who live in the settlements, but the settlements have to be there first, and the settlements have to be safe, and whether they're safe depends on whether the structures are right. She paused. And because the arrows are the force directions and the numbers are the order you do the things, and once you understand that, you can figure out anything. I looked at her. I think you'd be very good at it, I said. She nodded once, filing it, and turned her attention back to the Segment 6 access point. The 40 minutes went as 40 minutes go on a construction site, slowly in some places and quickly in others, measured in sounds rather than intervals. The methodical knock of clearing work. The brief pauses between steps. Amath's voice on the comm reading the sequence numbers aloud, which meant he was confirming each step against the written document rather than trusting memory, which was exactly right, which was what you did when the stakes were what they were. And then the sounds changed. Not dramatically, just the quality of them, a shift from the steady rhythm of clearance work to something with more forward motion in it, more direction. And then Amath's voice carrying across the 20 meters, movement in the junction. We have opening. Bravo team, respond. Bravo, can you hear me? A pause, which was the length of a corridor, and a burst of static. And then thin with distance but intact. Amath, we hear you. We've got light. The relief is not a warm thing. People say it is, but it isn't. It is a structural thing, the release of a load that you have been carrying without fully knowing the weight of it, and what you feel in the aftermath is not warmth but the sudden awareness of a particular kind of readiness that is no longer needed. The calculations stop running. The contingencies stop forming. The sequence that has been running in the back of your mind like a parallel process, checking and rechecking, finally closes. I breathed through it carefully because the ribs had opinions, and then I watched the access point. They came out one at a time because that is how you come out of a confined space, carefully, head down, one person at a time, no rushing, because rushing is how a confined space extraction becomes a second incident. 2 from Bravo team first. A young woman with a long cut above her eyebrow, clean and closed, managed from whatever kit they'd had with them. and a man about my age who moved with the careful quality of someone whose ribs were in the same conversation mine were in. Then Delta, a single worker, younger than both of the others, who came out last and stood in the afternoon light, and looked at the half-built construction site around him with the expression of someone who has just comprehensively revised his opinions about exterior air and direct light. Ahmeth was talking to them. The medical team, 2 technicians who had come up from the shelter sometime during the wait, quiet enough that I hadn't registered their arrival until they were already there, were working from their kits, methodical and efficient. "They're okay," Save said. "They are," I said. "Because you knew the numbers," she said, "and because you wrote them down and brought them to him yourself." "Because I knew the numbers," I said, "and because Ahmeth listened, and because his crew did the work correctly, and because Bravo and Delta held their position and didn't try to clear the junction themselves. Everyone did the part they were able to do." She looked at me. "My mother says that," she said, "when people tell her she saved them. She says, I did the part I was able to do." "She's a good medical officer," I said. "She's the best one I know," Save said, "but I only know the ones who have come through the shelter, so that might not be a large sample." "It's still a valid observation," I said. She nodded, filed it. Ahmeth came over when the 3 workers were with the medical technicians. He stood in front of the equipment case and looked at me sitting on it and did the arithmetic expression, the one with no clean answer. "Good sequence," he said. "The formation did the geometry," I said. "The sheer logic is predictable once you have the foundation variance. It just wasn't in the standard table." "It will be," he said. "I'll have the incident summary in the survey log tonight." "You filed the formal correction." "Tomorrow," I said. "Tomorrow," he agreed. "Your bag will keep. Go back to the shelter." This time I went. Save walked beside me, slightly to my left, at the speed I was walking. The afternoon had moved further into itself while we'd been at the segment 6 point, and the light was lower now, coming in at the angle that made shadows. In that light, the half-built structures of the outpost cast long lines across the construction terrain, and the finished sections caught the last of the direct sun and held it, and the whole site had the quality I'd noticed when I first arrived 3 weeks ago. The quality of a place that knows what it is going to be and is working steadily, methodically, one day at a time toward being it. "Save," I said, when we were about halfway back. "Yes," she said. "You were right about the equipment case," I said. "It was a good case." She nodded. "It's been there 3 days," she said. "I didn't know if anyone would move it." "Nobody moved it." "No," she said, with the quiet satisfaction of a correct prediction confirmed. We kept walking. The last 200 meters back were slower than the first 200 meters out had been. The ribs had been generous earlier. The forward motion and the purpose had suppressed their commentary to something manageable, but purpose worked differently on a return leg, and now they were less interested in being suppressed. I kept the breathing even. I counted the meters. 241, 242, 243. "You're counting," Save said. "Yes," I said. "Like the sequence," she said. "Like the sequence," I said. "Something to hold on to." She walked at my pace without comment, slightly to my left, and twice said "soft" here in the flat conversational tone of someone citing a fact, and twice I moved right, and twice it was more solid. The field kit over her shoulder had been opened and reclosed once during our wait at the equipment case. She'd taken something out and put it back in a different order, which I suspected meant she'd reorganized it during the 40 minutes, because 40 minutes is long enough to reorganize a field kit if you already know what should go where and you have opinions about the current arrangement. I didn't ask. Some things you leave to their own logic. Railveth was at the door of the shelter when we came across the last 50 meters of terrain toward it. She was standing with her hands at her sides, and her expression was the decided one. the one that had already completed its arithmetic and arrived at its conclusions and was waiting for the world to catch up. She looked at Save first. "All right," she said. "He didn't fall," Save said. "The workers came out. He knew the right sequence, and he wrote it down and brought it himself because a written sequence delivered by the person who designed it is not the same as a written sequence delivered by someone else." Railveth looked at me. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to add to that. "Come in," she said. Inside, she directed me back to the cot with a quality of quiet certainty that I recognized as the kind that did not expect negotiation and did not require enforcement. I went. I sat. I lay back, because the cot was there, and the counting was done, and the sequence had worked, and there was nothing further that required me to be upright. She ran the scanner again. The full sequence. Left side, right side, the head, the shoulder, the hip. Methodical, ordered, nothing missed. "Ribs are stable," she said. "No change from 4 hours ago, which, given what you did in the intervening period, is a better outcome than I had standing odds for." She set the scanner on the tray. "Concussion indicators are within the moderate range. The walking didn't worsen them." "Good," I said. "You're going to stay on this cot for the rest of the evening," she said. "Yes," I said. "There is food in the cabinet when you want it. Water is already on the side table." "Thank you," I said. She stood at the side of the cot and looked at me for a moment. Not the clinical look, not the arithmetic look, something quieter than both of those and more direct. "You're fine," she said. The same words she'd said when I first opened my eyes, but different now. Not a clinical assessment and not a reassurance. A statement between two people who had both been present for the same morning and the same afternoon and who both understood what those words meant inside the specific context of this specific day. The numbers worked. The ceiling stayed up. The people came out. The man on the cot did the part he was able to do and came back, and is on the cot where he belongs. "I know," I said. She put the scanner back in its position. Crossed to the cabinet, checked the drawer, crossed back to the instrument tray. Everything in its place, everything in the order it was supposed to be in. Save came to the end of the cot, both hands on the lower rail. She looked at me with the silver-gray eyes for a moment, and I looked back at her, and the shelter was very quiet except for the light that hummed. "The arrows are the force directions," she said. "Yes," I said. "And the numbers next to the boxes are the order you do the things." "Yes." "And the boxes with the dotted lines are the parts that fall if you do it wrong." "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. Her hands were on the rail and her eyes were on me, steady, with the particular quality of total attention that I had come to recognize as simply how she was in the world, not performing it, not working at it, just doing it. The way you do a thing that is your nature. "I'm going to learn structures," she said. The same tone as before, not a hope, not a question, a decision stated to someone she considered worth telling. "I know," I said. "I think you already have." She looked at the survey pad, which was on the side table next to the water. She looked at the load diagram I'd drawn in the margin, the arrows, the numbered boxes, the dotted lines. "Can I keep a copy?" she said. "The diagram," I said. "Yes." I picked up the pad and tore the margin carefully from the page and handed it to her. She took it with both hands, looked at it for a moment. Then she folded it once precisely and put it in the outer pocket of her field kit. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you," I said, "for the survey pad and for knowing the terrain." She nodded once, filing it, and let go of the rail and went to the cabinet and began returning the instruments to their correct positions. Quietly, methodically, in the order her mother would have wanted. Railveth came to stand at the side of the cot. She looked down at me with the decided expression, the one that had already arrived at all its conclusions. "Sleep," she said. I did. The correction document, was in the survey log by the following morning. Ahmeth had filed it before the 6 o'clock shift, had pulled the Tuesday preliminary report and cross-referenced every number, and found them exactly where I'd said they would be, and had added his own incident summary with a detailed note, requesting that the Compact Engineering Standards Office revise the load sequence framework for Eastern Quadrant formations with clay shale interfaces at or above 3-meter depth, with a subsidiary recommendation that the standard substrate analysis protocol be updated to include spring melt assessment requirements for Type 3 frontier formations in plateau-adjacent terrain. He flagged it for priority review. I saw the flag when I pulled the log at 6:30, still on the cot, with the water from the side table and a breakfast that Railveth had set on the cabinet edge without waking me. I got my survey bag back from Segment 4 3 days later, when the junction was fully cleared and the structural assessment team had confirmed the corridor safe to enter. Everything was intact. The foundation variance data, the Tuesday survey notes, the preliminary correction with its diagrams and the 17mm variance measurements, and the spring melt substrate analysis, I'd run on my own initiative, because something about the Eastern Quadrant's ground behavior had been telling me since the first week that the standard framework wasn't giving me complete numbers. All of it intact. All of it in the right order in the bag, because I organize survey bags the way you organize any system, so that what you need most urgently is the thing you can reach first. I filed the formal correction document that afternoon, 11 pages. The load geometry section I rewrote twice because the first draft wasn't clear enough to stand alone, because I have learned that a document that requires someone to already understand the thing to follow the explanation is a document that fails the people who need it most. The final version had 3 diagrams, a worked example with actual numbers from the Keth-Vareth Eastern Formation, and an appendix that contained the full clay shale interface analysis in a form that any survey coordinator on any frontier outpost with a similar formation type could pull, read, and apply on the same day they found the variance. Save came to the shelter window while I was working on the 3rd diagram. She appeared without announcement, chin on the sill, hands on the frame, and watched me draw for a moment. "What are you writing?" she said. "The correction document," I said, "for the load sequence table." "So other coordinators will have the numbers," she said. "So other coordinators will have the numbers and the geometry and the substrate analysis," I said. "And so other workers in other corridors on other frontier outposts don't end up in segments 6 through 8 waiting for a ceiling to decide what it's going to do." She was quiet for a moment, looking at the diagram. "When I learn structures," she said, "I'm going to read it." "Then I'll make sure it's clear enough to be worth reading," I said. She considered this, then nodded, satisfied, and went back to whatever she had been doing before she appeared at the window, which I suspected, based on the field kit over her shoulder and the survey pad under her arm, involved a systematic inventory of something she had decided needed cataloging. 3 weeks later, when the Eastern Corridor was fully sealed and the Phase 4 foundation work was progressing on schedule, and I was packing my survey equipment for transit to my next posting, I found something in the outer pocket of my survey bag. A piece of folded paper, small, precise fold done carefully. I opened it. A load diagram, drawn in a child's hand, meticulous, methodical, the force arrows labeled with the correct terminology, the numbered sequence written down the right side in small, even figures, each box with the dotted lines marked exactly where the dotted lines belonged. At the bottom, in the same careful hand. The arrows are the force directions. The numbers are the order you do the things. The dotted lines are what falls if you do it wrong. And below that, smaller. I'm going to learn structures. I already have the first diagram. I folded the paper along its original crease and put it in the inner pocket of the survey bag, next to the Tuesday field notes and the foundation variance data, where the things that mattered were kept. The things that didn't go missing